If you don't know anything about the Baltics, it basically goes like this. Estonia is a depressed yet attractive nerd girl who lives right next to...
Come play with us, Estonia.
Once upon a time, there was a nerdy girl in school who was always getting picked on. One day, the school had a talent show. She took off her glasses and sang with a passion beyond all comprehension. Every guy asked her out after that. That's basically Estonia. First of all, Estonia is classified as a North European country. Do not call them Eastern, as it has former USSR connotations that they do not want to be affiliated with. Located on the Baltic Sea, just a short ferry ride south below their brothers in Finland, bordered by Russia to the east and Latvia to the south. The country is divided into 15 counties, or maakunnat, with the capital Tallinn, located in the north just on the Gulf of Finland in the Baltic. However, speaking of roads, in the wintertime when the Baltic freezes over, a charming little miracle happens. Estonia gains the world's longest ice road that travels from the mainland to Hiiumaa Island in the west. The road is about 26 kilometers long and operates between January and March when the ice is just thick enough to carry the weight of most vehicles. Speaking of roads again, Estonia has strict rules on wearing reflective clothing at night. If you are caught at night not wearing something that helps others see you, you could get up to 400 euros in a fine. Otherwise, Estonia is quite a charming place with quaint towns and saunas everywhere, and clear Wi-Fi can be found even in the most remote areas in the country. Even in the middle of the forest, which is actually kind of growing pretty fast. Okay, I didn't really think it was going to be this easy, but one way you can remember what Estonia is like is that it's really actually kind of stony. Found in the lush forests and meadows, Estonia is actually home to more giant boulders than any other European nation. And not only that, but Estonia is also Europe's largest shale oil producer, second in the world after China, with most of the rocky deposits found along the north and northeastern parts of the country. Simply put, Estonia is pretty lush and beautiful. They're actually going through a reforestation phase right now, partially thanks to the declining population, in which now over half of the entire country, some numbers estimate over 60%, is covered in forest. Estonia is generally flat. I mean, the highest point, Suurmunamägi, or Egg Mountain, is only 318 meters tall, and at over 1400 they have a ton of lakes and even more small ponds. The rest of the country is comprised of open bogs, fens, and wetlands. They're never short in supply of fresh, boggy mud. And waterfalls, oh my gosh, some amazing ones like in Balaste, Yagala, and Keayoa Falls are some of the most pristine, magnificent nature sites. But definitely try not to miss out on the national animal, the charming blue barn swallow. In terms of produce, Estonia is a very hearty meat and potatoes type of country, with national dishes like blood sausage and lingonberries, and raim, or Baltic dwarf herring. Ah, Estonia, you want so bad to be labeled as Nordic. You're so close, but yeah, not quite there. First of all, the country has about 1.3 million people and has seen a 19% population decline in the past 2 decades. The country is made up of nearly 70% of people that identify as ethnically Estonian, about 23% of the country is Russian, and the remainder are mostly Ukrainians, Finns, and other people groups. Estonians speak Estonian, a Uralic-based language in the same group as Finnish. Now, culture-wise, Estonia may be small, but is packed with detail. First of all, throughout history, they were either subject to the Danes, Swedes, and the Germans, or the Russians, until finally they gained independence from the Soviet Union in 1991, literally by singing. Seriously. Today, Estonia has developed dramatically from its former years. Estonia is a highly tech-savvy country with more startups per capita than anywhere else in Europe. They invented Hotmail, Kazaa, and Skype, which was pretty much invented by Estonians. I mean, there was a Swede and a Dane involved somewhere, but the Estonians did pretty much all of the programming. Now here's the thing. To this day, Estonia has the highest prevalence of females to males in the world, with 0.84 men for every 1 woman. It's been said the reasoning behind this is because so many of the men were killed during the Soviet times, leaving an influx of women behind. To this day, Estonia also has the highest number of international fashion models per capita in the world. I mean, after all those years of getting the pick of the litter, I guess Estonians bred some really attractive people. Unfortunately, Estonia also has one of the highest unmarried and single parent ratios in Europe as well. Part of this has to do with the fact that Estonia disputedly has the lowest importance of religion on any country in Europe, as less than 20% claim to be affiliated with any religion at all. Therefore, many people don't really see a need for marriage as grounds to define the relationship, as it has just social and sometimes even religious institutional connotations that has no bearance on their lives, and they choose to just kind of bypass it altogether. To this day, many Estonian children are raised by a single parent who may cohabit with another partner, but almost likely will never get married. Which Lithuania and Latvia are kind of like the 2 friends that they used to play with in the sandbox when they were kids, but then they kind of grew up and kind of stopped hanging out. Lithuania and Latvia are kind of like, Estonia, just accept the fact that you are Baltic, not Nordic. Join us. Their best friends, however, would have to be Finland. Finland is kind of like the bigger brother that has always loved his little sister, but hated seeing her get tossed around from empire to empire. They share the same cultures and general life values and have always been there for each other as the last surviving Uralic peoples on the planet. In conclusion, if Europe was a choir, Estonia would be like that one girl who didn't get any solos, but then gets to sing that one high note that causes the whole crowd to give her a standing ovation. Latvia is one of those countries that just kind of naturally exudes this ambiance of charming, mystical, dark undertones surrounded by subtle flares of despair, and they're cool with it. And here's the thing, Latvia is the good twin. No, but seriously, jokes aside, Latvia does come with an incredibly vibrant culture rooted in unique traditions found almost nowhere else on Earth. First of all, Latvia is located in the northern European region known as the Baltics due to the location on the Baltic Sea, surrounded by 4 other countries. The country is divided into 110 municipalities and 9 republic cities, with the capital Riga located along the aptly named Gulf of Riga. 5 historical regions of Latvia for cultural distinction: Kurland, Semigalia, Salonia, Vitseme, and Latgale. Speaking of Kurland, fun side note, Latvians actually once colonized Africa and the Caribbean under the Duchy of Kurland. The largest cities after Riga are Daugavpils and Liepāja, and the 2 busiest and international airports are Riga International and Liepāja International. Now, Riga may be the capital, but it's a river city on the Daugava River, not a port city, so most shipments must come in either at Ventspils or on Liepāja on the Baltic coast. The funny thing is, even though Latvia has a decent-sized coast, it owns virtually none of the islands that come with it. Even this little guy, Ruhnu, which belongs to Estonia, even though it's closer to Latvia's mainland. Now, if there's one thing about Latvia that makes it stick out, it would have to be the architecture. Riga is famously known for its Nouveau-style buildings, which won the title of European Capital of Culture back in 2014. The city has over 4,000 historic wooden buildings, more than any other European city. And of course, if you Google Latvia, it's hard not to come across the most iconic building, the House of Blackheads, originally built in the 1400s. It was bombed in World War II and rebuilt. It's beautiful. But the country does come with an austere backdrop. Back in Soviet times, things got pretty morbid, and you still see the residue to this very day. You can see ghost towns that were once used to house Soviet officials and their families, like Skrudna 1, an abandoned radar station village complete with decaying apartments, schools, and gymnasiums, all adorned with Lenin and Soviet imagery left to rot. The Latvians kind of use this to their advantage, though. They even took a military prison and made it into the world's creepiest hotel. The Karausta Military Prison Hotel, in which you can pay to be treated like a prisoner of war in World War II Nazi Germany times. Your accommodations include getting yelled at and arrested, sent to a dark, damp, gritty room with no beds, only a light mattress and blankets on the floor, no room service, and you get locked in your room. Latvia! Speaking of which, some other places of interest might include Riga's Old City, the Basilica of Aglona, Turaida and Koknese Castle ruins, the Monument of Freedom, Rundal Palace, sometimes called the Versailles of the North, the Art Nouveau District and the Art Nouveau Museum, the Mark Rothko Museum, pretty much the entire city of Cesis, Ziemelu Northern Forts, and the Daugavpils Fortress. Alright, the lands of the Baltic areas are like copy, paste, done! So if you watch the Estonia episode, you'll probably know what I'm gonna say. Latvia is located on the East European plain, generally a flat area, on average no more than 100 meters above sea level, with mild rolling hills every so often. The highest point, Geisenkalts, is only about 312 meters. About 10% of the country is made up of peat bogs and swamps, and over half the country is forested. That's actually an increase as Latvia is experiencing natural afforestation. That's the opposite of deforestation, because just so you know, it's...
Yeah, we get it. Just keep going, Paul.
The country has over 12,500 rivers. The longest one, as mentioned before, is the Daugava. And Latvia has the widest waterfall in Europe, the Ventas Rumba, about 250 meters wide, and the largest lake in the country being the Lubans. Otherwise, economically, Latvia has seen an overall huge GDP resurgence since the independence from the Soviet Union. Basically, they had to switch everything from state-owned to privatization, and when that happens, people usually get very creative. I mean, why do you think they built that prison hotel? Their economy is mostly run off of industrial goods like textiles, wood products, pharmaceuticals, and processed foods. Agriculture-wise, Latvians love 2 things: meat and dairy. Almost every meal will have these 2 things. If you don't know anything about Baltic cuisine, basically it's hearty, heavy meals with rye bread, lots of butter and fat with little or no spices, except for maybe dill and caraway seeds. They love caraway, they even put it in their cheeses. Of course, they also have their own specialties like sklandrausis, those bacon and onion bun things, and the national liquor, Riga Black Balsam, which has like 24 different ingredients and it supposedly cures illness. Oh, and the national animals are the white wagtail bird. However, Latvia is also famous for the blue cows of Kurtzeme. Okay, now it's often said that if you want to learn how Europeans were speaking in the Stone Age, learn Latvian or Lithuanian. First of all, Latvia has about 2 million people and has the second lowest ratio of men to women in the world at 0.85 men per 1 woman. Remember, Estonia was the highest. The country is made up of 63% of people that identify as ethnically Latvian, about a quarter are Russian, and the rest are made up of other groups, mostly Belarusians, Ukrainians, Poles, and Lithuanians. About the sex ratio thing, just like the other Baltic states, Latvia experienced a huge population loss during World War II. In fact, almost 13% of the entire country was killed, one of the highest percentages in Europe, and of course the vast majority of these people were men. And just like all the other Baltic states, a lot of these women grew up to be supermodels or insanely tall, like 7'1", 2.1 1.15 meter tall Ulyana Semyonova, who helped Latvia get all these gold medals back in the Soviet times in basketball, and she was the first non-US woman enshrined in the Basketball Hall of Fame. Yeah, that is a tall woman. Today, Latvian and Lithuanian are the only two Baltic languages left in existence. Best way I can personally put it. Paganism and tribal kingdoms, Northern Crusades, the state of Livonia, Germans, Danes, Poles, Lithuanians, Swedish all take turns at invading. Finally, Russians come in, World War I, War for Independence. They get their first republic for a few decades. Then Russia comes in and is like, JK, I'm back. They become a Soviet republic state. Tons of people die. 1941, Nazi occupation. Tons of people die again. Soviets come in and reclaim Latvia. Yada, yada, yada. All the Soviet years, Russians move in. 1991, independence through the singing revolution that they did with all the other Baltic states. 2000s, they went through an economic boom. 2008 recession. And today they're recovering and doing fine, mostly. Whew. So as you can see, Latvia is an interesting tradition-holding, somewhat dark past-oriented nation that moves with haste. Let's see. Now, in school, have you ever been sent to detention, and while in detention, you started talking to the person next to you and found out that you actually had a lot in common? Yeah, it's kind of like how Latvia made friends. I would probably say Lithuania and Estonia, even though Estonia pays more attention to Finland. All three Baltic states grew up together and graduated college, but Estonia got closer to Finland, and out of jealousy, Latvia kind of tried to hook up with Sweden, but Sweden was like, eh. Lithuania is like the twin that was separated at birth. Latvian territory was taken over by Germans in the 13th century, and Lithuania kind of went off and created its own empire with the Poles. In the end, though, the two sisters have always held on as the last surviving Balts in the world, and as crazy as things got, they will always be there for each other. In conclusion, Latvia has had a lot of pressure over the years from numerous factors, but they still pull through by embracing the austerity that enshrines them. Welcome to the creepier Baltic sister, Lithuania. Now, Lithuania may be the largest Baltic country in size, but it kind of got the short end of the stick when it came to coastline. First of all, the country is located in the area of Europe known as the Baltic, which, no shocker, borders the Baltic Sea to the north. The nation is divided into 10 counties, with the capital Vilnius located in the south. They are also surrounded by 4 countries. Remember, this little chopped up exclave Kaliningrad belongs to Russia, in which they share this long, famous stretch of land known as the Curonian Spit, a 98-kilometer long sandy barricade with dunes, about 54 kilometers of which belong to Lithuania, and it all effectively cuts off the entire Curonian lagoon except for this small opening at the port of Klaipėda. This is literally where almost all seabound shipping comes into Lithuania. I mean, come on, nobody's gonna deliver cargo at that dinky little dock at Palanga. So essentially, Russia has the bigger portion of the lagoon, but Lithuania has the only way out. The largest cities after Vilnius are Kaunas and the city we just talked about, Klaipėda. And surprisingly, for such a small country, they actually have 4 international airports, the busiest in order being Vilnius, Kaunas, Palanga, and Šiauliai internationals. Now here's the thing, Lithuania is proud to claim that they, debatedly, have the geographical center of Europe. Like, they literally even built a monument and sculpture park next to showcase it. Lithuania does kind of have a dark past. I mean, they did play a huge role in the Holocaust during World War II. They had one of the most significant Jewish populations in Europe, once nicknamed the Jerusalem of the North. Nearly the entire population of about 250,000 was killed by Nazis with a huge massacre at Ponari. Many were sent to the HKP 562 forced labor camp in Vilnius. Today, various memorials and museums and exhibitions can be found to commemorate the incident. Also, due to the high emigration rate after joining the EU, many towns started to see houses and buildings and properties left unattended and decaying, like the Ignalia nuclear power plant, the Palace of Sports and Concerts, the Trade Unions building, the Plokštine nuclear launch site. Yeah, nuclear launch site. So yeah, that kind of sets the mood, right? Oh, and they also have a Devil's Museum and a KGB experience in a former Soviet bunker where you can pay to pretend to be a prisoner getting yelled at and interrogated, complete with guard dogs and everything. Charming! Speaking of which, some places of interest might include, and keep in mind, I will not really pronounce these Baltic words because they're so hard, these castles, this monastery, the Liberty Boulevard, the Hill of 3 Crosses, the Monument of the Victims of Fascism, the funicular railway of this place, the Museum for the Blind, the Cat Museum, the Museum of Illusions, the Frank Zappa Memorial, the Pan House, the Orvydas Garden, and finally the 2 most iconic cultural landmarks that might really give you a feel of what Lithuania is all about, the Hill of Crosses, which has over 100,000 crosses, and nobody really knows why it got started that way, and even though the Vatican says it's a holy place full of power, the locals think it's kind of creepy, and the Hill of Witches, a sculpture park with sinister-looking carved wood images depicting characters from ancient Lithuanian folklore from back in the pagan days. So yeah, Lithuania is kind of like a weird pagan-y, Catholic-y, forest-loving, technology-advancing, but kind of reserved and overcast country. Lithuania, or Lietuva, gets its name from Lietus va, which means rain here, symbolizing the abundance of rain and fertile land. First of all, the country is made up of 4 general parts: the flat coast, the slightly higher uplands, the middle lowlands, and the Baltic highlands. Here you can find the tallest point, Aukštojas, at only about 293 meters in elevation, making Lithuania the flattest of the Baltic states. Amidst everything, at over a third of the country, you will find, just like the other Baltic states, a plethora of boggy marshland and swamps, as well as forests, the longest river being the Neman, which starts in Belarus Belarus flowing through Konus, blocking into the Konus Reservoir. However, the largest lake would be Lake Drukshai, shared partially with Belarus. Oh, and the national animal is a stork. Lithuania also has the highest nesting density for storks in the world. They believe it's good luck if a stork nests near your house. They even have a holiday dedicated to them on March 25th. So anyway, resources. One thing that Lithuania is famous for is amber. The Baltic coast has the largest known natural amber deposits in the world, and Lithuania was pretty much the place where it all started in the town of Juodkrantė. I'm not even gonna try that again. Otherwise, much of the land is arable, over a third is cultivated. Some national dishes of Lithuania might include things like cold beet soup, stuffed cabbage rolls, that Kastinis dairy product thing, anthill cake, tree cake, poppy seed rolls, blood soup, and Liliputas cheese. So anyway, the country has about 2.8 million people and is the largest economy in the Baltics with the highest GDP as well. The majority of the country, at around 88%, identify as ethnically Lithuanian, about 6% are Poles, 5% Russian, and the rest are other groups, mostly Slavs like Ukrainians and Belarusians, with a few other minority groups mixed in as well. Lithuanian is disputably the oldest Indo-European language still in use. Some say it even still retains words that related to ancient Sanskrit originated in India. Yeah, India. For example, Agnis versus Ugnis, Vayus versus Vejas, Devas, Dievas, and the list goes on and on. It's pretty strange how close the coincidence is when you look into it. Oh, and to say thank you in Lithuanian, all you have to do is sneeze. Like, literally, the word for thank you is achu. Now, if you don't know anything about the Baltic, this region has the highest ratio of two things: blonde-haired, blue-eyed people and women to men. The numbers usually switch off every so often, but Lithuania usually ranks second or third between Latvia and Estonia when it comes to male and female ratios, ranging between 0.88 males for every female. This is partially due to a number of factors, such as large portions of the male population being killed off during war times, mortality rates caused by things like smoking or alcoholism, and suicide. Here at Geography Now, we don't gloss over the controversy, but try to report it as objectively as possible, and unfortunately, Lithuania often ranks in the top 3 suicide per capita nations in the world, many times first. In a weird way though, this dark fact has kind of put a sort of weirdly romanticized image on Lithuania and Lithuanians to the point where the people just kind of shrug and own up to it. I mean, this dude invented a euthanasia roller coaster concept designed to kill the passengers, and Lithuania was selected to be the childhood home of fictional character Hannibal Lecter. Add some pagan statues juxtaposed to thousands of overly ornate crosses in a swampy land, and bam, you have the perfect setting for No, but seriously, Lithuania is not all jump scares. It's more of like a legendary place where ancient customs still live on, with a valiant populace that became the first to break away from the Soviet Empire. And they love basketball. Speaking of which, history time. In the quickest way I can put it, pagan tribes, this guy unites them all and becomes king, like literally the only king in all their history. Wars with the Teutonic Order. The 1400s, it becomes the biggest country in Europe with the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth. They briefly colonized parts of Africa and the Caribbean. Colonies sold off and lost, divided by Russia, Prussia, and Austria. Book smuggling years to keep their language alive. Quick independence in 1918, but then the Russians came in again. Nazis tried to take a go. Back to the USSR. Bloodiest guerrilla war in European history. Over 30,000 Lithuanian men die. Singing revolution with all the other Baltic states. Independence finally in the 90s. Joins the EU and Eurozone. They somehow became the basketball capital of Europe, and it's almost like a religion to them. And here we are today. And speaking of basketball, some famous Lithuanians might include all these basketball players. And celebrities with partial Lithuanian heritage, but it still kind of counts to Lithuanians, might include Jason Sudeikis, Charles Bronson, John C. Reilly, Sean Penn, Sacha Baron Cohen, Bob Dylan, William Shatner, Pink, Anthony Kiedis. And before we finish off this segment, some last minute factoids. Instead of the Easter Bunny, they have an Easter Grandma. They have the highest number of hot air balloons per capita. They have their own national perfume scent. They have some of the fastest internet in the world. It's considered bad luck to whistle inside of a house, otherwise it'll explode and burn down. In conclusion, Lithuania is the larger of the last surviving Baltic peoples on the planet, and it's quite amazing how they've held it all together to this day. But seriously, if you don't want to become extinct, start making babies.